Hi, this is Sonam Jimbasangi, bearing enrollment number 11769602. Today, I'll be presenting on the topic the systemic drivers of cheap and child labor in the garment and cotton industries. Here, basically, I've chosen the textile industries. Therefore, I'll present on the system map that shows how different social, economic, and industry related factors interconnect to sustain the cycle of cheap labor and child labor in the cotton and garment industries. The root cause here is poverty and debt. The system begins with poverty and vulnerability. Families in these conditions often take loans and they cannot repay. When they seek help from families, it often leads to generational debt passed on children to children, locking entire families into cycle of economic hardship. Debt and low wage jobs again lead to debt and low wage jobs. Due to burden of debt, individuals are forced to accept any available work, usually low paying exploitative jobs. These decisions aren't driven by the choice but by survival, increasing the supply of cheap labor and keeping wages low. Supply of cheap labor here, the employers, driven by profit, exploit this desperation. The abundant supply of cheap labor feeds into cotton and garment industry where cost cutting is prioritized over ethics and safety. Employer here the main thing is employer exploitation and lead to unsafe work environment. The push for high output at low cost creates unsafe workplace. Workers endures long hours risking injuries and several burnout. Still they continue due to lack of alternatives because they don't have any other ways or other alternatives to do. After that lead to the high consumer demand and labor pressure. Global consumer demands for fast fashion and cheap products increase pressure on manufacturer. This escalates the demand for even more cheaper labor, which force them to go for a cheaper labor, reinforcing the exploitative cycle. And this lead to child labor consequences or child labor. As families struggle and the workplace demand more hands, therefore children are pulled into the workforce. This is not only violates this right but ensure the cycle of generational debt and exploitation continues. To summarize this whole thing, which I have forgot to mention earlier, basically this map is driven from based on countries like India and Bangladesh. To sum up this map, system map, poverty leads to debt. Debt drives people into cheap labor. Employers exploit this with unsafe condition. High global demands keeps the system running, eventually pulling children into workforce, perpetuating general generational cycle of poverty. And to solve this issue or to address these issues, we need stronger law enforcement, support for poor families, responsible practice for companies, and more informed consumer who choose ethical products, which might basically solve this. issues. Thank you for your patience.